Welcome to She Sells Radio. If you want to grow your brand and your visibility on social media, which I know you do, specifically LinkedIn, which I know so many of my listeners do, then you are going to want to listen in to today's episode with my guest, Matthew Rolnick, who literally wrote the book on finding your voice and building your brand online. So if you're not yet familiar with Matthew, he's the VP of Strategy and Innovation at Yaymaker. He's a best-selling author of the book, Find Your Yay. He's a speaker. He's a Udemy instructor with over 130,000 students learning from him, a Forbes contributing writer, and he partners with his wife, Sabine, who we were actually just talking about in the pre-chat. So we'll talk about her a bit more today too, in their real estate business. So Matthew, I'm so glad to have you here today. And I understand that what you're going to tell us about and some of what you're going to teach helped you secure, I believe, 60 corporate clients for your company from LinkedIn. Is that right?
That is correct. And great talking to you, Elyse. Very excited. And I love talking about LinkedIn and social selling and building your brand with it. So absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm excited. And when you shared that with me, when we connected initially on LinkedIn, which is how this came together. So I think it's always so powerful when you get to learn from someone who practices what they preach and uses it the right way. And I'm excited to learn more too, because I've found for us, like LinkedIn is a huge place where we connect with clients and grow. And I also know there's so much I can learn and grow in, and I want to dive in with you today. So I think before we get into that, I would love if you could just share what got you so passionate about helping people find their voice, helping them build and create authentic content online. Like, was this always something that you could have seen coming, or is this something that developed in you over the years?
Well, I'll share at the age of 50, right when the pandemic hit, I actually got furloughed from Groupon. They furloughed a lot of managers and their sales professionals. And for some reason, I had a lot of peace of mind, and I decided to utilize LinkedIn to share ideas to help businesses and help others. And I was a little less worried about myself. And I just started posting a lot, and it started building more connections. More people were sharing with me. They wanted to hear more. At the same time, a friend of mine, Dan Herman, started the company Yaymaker and Paint Night, and I joined him, and he really encouraged me to lean a lot into it. Where in the past, when I worked for companies, I was a little more concerned, like, am I aligned with the company brand? Will they encourage me? Does it need to get approved by their communications or PR? But he's like, Matt, go for it, share, help. It's only going to help Yaymaker and everything we're doing. So I started posting a lot about corporate culture and team building events. And it just started snowballing, where I started building new partnerships and then started getting new clients from it. So it really happened, I'd say, April 2020 is when I really started promoting more and doing more on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's so interesting when I love, getting to connect with all sorts of people with varied backgrounds here. And the pandemic clarified a lot of things for a lot of people. So it's interesting that that's where some of this kind of spawned for you too. That opportunity that on the front end probably felt like a big challenge, but then on the back end, you took it and leveraged it. So like, first lesson right there, right? For everybody listening, is there's always the gold inside the thing that feels challenging. And then I think also for any of our listeners who are CEOs or who are leading organizations and sales teams, you said Dan was his name. Is that right?
Yes.
How you said that he empowered you to just go out and post and share. And some of my background is in the personal branding space as well. And that's one of the biggest things that I saw holding companies back, was like not encouraging their people to post, trying to control and just micromanage every single thing their employees put out, which it doesn't work. So I know we're going to talk more about that today too, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're in sales, as a sales leader. So let's talk about this. I want to kind of lay the foundation here for if someone is wanting to get more visible online and wanting to build their brand, but they don't feel like they've really found their voice yet. Because I know that's something that you talk about in your book, Find Your Yay, and you help people do. What is our voice online? How do we find it? How do we figure out what it is? Like, is there a process? Is it more just iterative trial and error? What does that look like?
So it's interesting. I checked a post, I believe you did today, and it was for 10 things women should do to elevate their sales. And one of them was, what are your natural strengths? And you also talked about challenges and setbacks, and I thought that was important too. But anyway, I think we all know what we have personal interests or strengths in. And I feel like that is an indicator potentially of some of our voice. I do like asking CEOs, leaders, all professionals, if you could do one TED Talk, what would that be on anything you want, open slate? And I feel like if somebody can think about or answer that, that can help them think about what's really most important to them. So I feel like if you can really align personally and professionally what your real message is, that can give you an indicator on what the kind of the perfect bullseye is. But whatever industry you're in, or whatever role you have, or if you think you have a strength, I think that helps you kind of shape your voice. And so if it doesn't matter the industry, whether you're in tech, whether you're in web development, accounting, fashion, if you're in that industry, you can start sharing some things that you're seeing that you find interesting. And if you're not necessarily comfortable of saying, here's all my ideas, you might just find an article that you find interesting or somebody else's post. And I'd say a step one is saying, I saw this on LinkedIn. I thought this was interesting because of A, B, or C, A, B, and C. So anyway, I think that's a step on finding your voice. And I believe in a lot of putting things out there, see what resonates with people, resonates with yourself. But I'd start with your industry, your role, and any personal interest that you have. I also believe there's hobbies people have. So I have friends that love pickleball, and they tie pickleball into lessons with what's going on in business. I mean, you can take almost any sport or hobby that you're personal and how you relate that professionally. And that's something that's authentic and connects people to you, and you give like insights and lessons that way.
So what if they're like, okay, if I could give a TED Talk, it would be about blank. It would be about this thing. They get clarity on it, but they don't see how it ties back to what they're doing in business. Are you saying, is it like do something that's totally unrelated to your business, or you got to find the tie-in? And if so, I think I know what your answer is going to be, because I know how I approach it, but I'm curious to hear what you say. How do we find the tie-in? Are there questions we can ask, or is there a lens we can frame it through? I'd love if you could give a little bit of thought on that.
So just to share, I have a little ADHD where I try to connect a lot of dots that maybe others don't, but I always like to align things personally and professionally. But there's some people, it's maybe a hot button. How they want to be communicated. It's just very important to be transparent or be fully honest, or, maybe somebody, it's just so important. They love being creative, I'll say. I mean, it's different for everybody. I mean, for me, I talk a lot about relationships. And to me, that's like everything. I mean, the most important thing in life, besides maybe health and I think relationships are so important with yourself, with friends, with colleagues, with others. And so I talk a lot about that. And I use that to tie in a lot of my content. But I talk about like what's important for me when it comes to communication, staying in touch with people. And I try to encourage people to always be forward thinking and helping others, not always expecting as much in return, but it's like you need to foster and develop those relationships. But it's not a clear cut. Everybody has a different calling, a different voice. I mean, there's some things I'd say that's common sense. I mean, the most basic is, hey, this is my job. This is my company. This is what I like. I can start with, when it comes to selling, for example, I like talking to people that have similar interests as me. And so I'll connect with people that went to, whether similar education, whether it's a similar sport, whether it's a similar hobby. I find I can connect people that way. I can send outbound messages that way. I find a connection that way. Maybe that's something you can start with.
Got it. I love that. I find there's always a tie-in, and it's just like, what approach are you going to take, and being able to think creatively in that way too. So you mentioned that, so you get furloughed, you're starting over essentially, right? Building your brand. And so you're working with a business partner who says, hey, just go post. And you said, I started posting, you can use the word aggressively, but like you were deliberate, you were intentional. I'd love if you could share a little bit more about like specifically what that looks like for you in terms of what you post on LinkedIn. So do you have something where like every day you do this type of thing, or do you do a video post on one day and a written post on another? Is it more organic? I think for someone who's looking to, okay, they're starting to find their voice, they're trying things out, they're sharing, but they need some sort of structure or framework to it. What would you say to them?
So I've got a few things to say. One is, I think you got to be careful not to make it too much about yourself. You want to make it about others. So always providing value. And again, I have to be careful on that because I always have something I want to share or promote or sell. So, and then another thing, I do think there's advantages, and I know people, content creators that have themes. So, Monday might be a motivational quote, Wednesday might be a poll, Thursday might be a video, Friday might be a little more fun. And I've done some things. I mean, I'd say I'm a little more organic, what inspires me. And I started more just posting more text, then I started doing more images. Now I do more polls and video. But I feel like you have to feel what's more natural to you. Now, for me, so like for Yaymaker, we do corporate team building events. So we do paint nights and mixologies and speakers and all these things. But I realized I just can't keep posting about, hey, do this event, do this. So I thought more broadly on what our company, as a solution, we're helping increase employee engagement. We're improving corporate culture. So I started sharing and wanted to be more of a thought leader on those topics. So that's when, like in Forbes, I'll talk about corporate culture, and I'll talk about employee engagement, and then maybe 10 to 15% of my posts are a little more hard hitting about, hey, this is what like a Yaymaker event. But for the most part, I want to provide value to others, and I don't want to make it just about what my goals are. I'll share free content or advice, like you can do a talent show, and you can do that virtually or in person. That's a free way of utilizing your employees to get more involved and improve culture, things like that. I mean, I talk about doing I do a lot of dad jokes, and but before a meeting, it can be an icebreaker, and it can be a little bit of a culture builder, get people a little more engaged or things like that. But that's things I like to talk about. I'll share something else that's really benefited me, my company, I feel like others, is just like you're doing with me. I really enjoy interviewing others and getting content and thought leadership from others. So even if there's companies that I'd love to work with that really aren't interested in my product or service, I might say, hey, can I talk to you about corporate culture? And I'll ask you 5, 6 questions. I'll do it through Zoom and on LinkedIn. And I find that there's multiple benefits from that. One is I get some great content. Two, I feel like I strengthen the relationship of the person I talk to. And then I notice a lot of people from that company will start engaging in that content. And then often, and again, sometimes they'll reach back afterwards and they're like, how can I work with you more? So without even me asking, just putting out more content, shining the light more on others, it has organically driven a lot of business for us.
Yeah. It's the power of platform, right? Always. I go on a lot of interviews. My favorite thing is getting to interview and ask questions. It's like, I already know about myself. I want to find out about other people, right? And to your point, there's all of those other things that can happen with that too. What if somebody's listening, and I would say with our listeners, and I haven't done like a poll, but I would say, when I look at our client base, it's probably 60 to 70% entrepreneur, 30 to 40% corporate, give or take. But I want to take a moment for those who are listening, who are in corporate sales, who are like, it would be brilliant to launch a LinkedIn live series and interview my target clients. And I want to post more, but they're bumping up against either regulations or compliance or a lot of restrictions around what they can and can't post. Do you have any advice? Is it like, sorry, you got to find another way? Or is there a way you could approach your leadership? Like what would you say to someone? Because we've got clients and members actively in our community who are doing this now in their company. And it's like, it's working, but they had to get buy-in from leadership. So how would you approach that?
So I guess a couple fold. I mean, one is I'm always encouraging CEOs and leaders and HR departments to encourage employees to post more on LinkedIn. I mean, to embrace it. Obviously there's certain topics, anything very charged, political, religion, things like that, encourage employees to stay away from. So add some bumpers, but in general, encourage employees to. Now, if you're an employee or you're a sales professional, you have this ambition to post more and things like that. Yeah, I think just reaching out to who up to you report to say, hey, I'm looking at doing this, share with them your content or ideas. I'd like to believe more and more companies are embracing that or things like that. If a company is really got handcuffing people to say, hey, we do not want you to post anything unless it comes from our communications department, then it gets extra challenging. Then I'm a believer in more engaging in other people's content, and you can add your context. So like one of the highest engagements responses I had with Gary Vaynerchuk. He's obviously a very strong leader, thought leader on LinkedIn, very much. I once posted, some context on one of his posts. And next thing you know is I saw somebody else says, here's my 5 favorite responses from Gary Vaynerchuk, highlighted me. And I had some other people reaching out to me or things like that. So, hopefully you can find a way. And again, I think it's just a quick business case. To just say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I also think too, is as long as you're promoting the business, most people that I know that are posting things on LinkedIn and it's showing their company in a good light and themselves, they're not getting pushback. And usually worst case scenario would be a company be like, hey, let me know this beforehand. And again, I have to be very careful professionally how to share that with somebody. But in general, if you use good judgment, I think most of the time it's applauded. And there's a woman, Drew Beerworth, who with this company Carbon, who we talk pronouns. She goes by she and they, and it was something that I was very interested in. But her company very much embraced her, and I interviewed her and things and it was just. But again, even the company liked it or things like that. So I feel like most people should be pleasantly surprised of a company encouraged, because it's free marketing too for that company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've come a long way. I started digital marketing in 2008. It's come a long way since then. And we've got a lot of listeners in finance or insurance where they're working with compliance. So I think one of the things that you shared, which I like, is there's always a way, there's always a workaround, even if it's commenting and engaging on other people's content, there's a way to do it and build thought leadership. So one of the other things I want to ask you about, Matthew, because you did this and I was really, I appreciated it because I send a lot of voice notes. I don't get a lot back, but you reached out and you introduced yourself to me on LinkedIn with a voice note, and it was super personable and friendly. And it's little stuff like that just stands out. So with LinkedIn or social media in general, there's obviously the marketing aspect. So putting out the content, but then there's also, how do you convert? And I'm a saleswoman at heart. I love marketing, but I love selling even more. And I know you said that you used your own LinkedIn content to generate 60 corporate leads for Yaymaker. And I forget if there was a time frame on that, but it was I remember it was an impressive amount of leads in a short amount of time.
Yeah, really within the first year, is really when the bulk of things, it was the time when, again, when the pandemic, companies were struggling what to do to connect. I was talking a lot about engaging employees, and it was important. And I was just getting calls after calls, messages on LinkedIn saying, boy, I love what you said, and I'd love to work with you. So, so most of them were then, and I'm still getting several now, but most of them were, I'd say, within the first 12 months. And again, what you said about the LinkedIn voice message, that's just a free feature on someone's mobile. I'm somebody, I've got over 15,000 followers on LinkedIn, and most I'm connected to. To me, I take a lot of pride in nurturing those. Most people I'm connected to, I try to leave a message at least once a year. A lot of people, once every few months. And I do find I like to share it as a tip. I say this is a way to kind of stand out or break through. I find it a little more personalized or engaging. And I do a lot of LinkedIn messages. If I see something, an article, I'll often forward it to people in my LinkedIn network who I might not be that close to or talk to, just saying, hey, I thought you might find this interesting. And I'll do a lot of intros on LinkedIn. Like somebody might have a podcast, somebody might be for somebody like yourself, there might be an amazing female leader, salesperson that has just a really strong voice and a message, I might just be like, hey, I think you two should connect.
Mm.
But I love being a matchmaker. I love being a super connector, and I just push that out. I don't, and I find I do it because I like to help people, but some people, there's a reciprocity where they want to help back. And for every 20 messages or intros I do, I usually find one or two come back. And so I just love doing that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's so I took down a note there too, because that's so interesting, like 15,000 connections and you're trying to touch a lot of them, you know, at least once a year, which is powerful. We could go down a whole rabbit hole with that. I don't think we will, but one of the things that I was curious about, so with these, you start off the company, you've got 60, so it wasn't leads, it was clients, 60 new corporate clients within the first year of doing this. So I just want everyone listening to think about, that's what, 5 a month if we average it out. Like, what would 5 new clients a month or 5 additional clients a month do for your bottom line? Yeah. How did you do that? Was that a combination of posting and then you were reaching out to people in DMs, or was it literally just you're posting and they're like, hey, Matthew, we love that, which is, I mean, it's like everyone's dream is they just have an inbox full of leads, but I feel like there's probably some outreach on your part too. Like, tell us a little bit about what that looked like.
So it is a combination. It was a combination of putting out content. It was letting people, making myself very accessible or available. If you have any questions, let me know. It was me just trying to help other people. There's a lot of people that were looking for opportunities or jobs that I would make sure I'd reach out. I always think it's important to reach out people when they're having challenging times. Later, when they became leaders in new positions or companies, they'd reach out to me in wanting to do team building events. I also really encourage testimonials. So, and that's been really powerful. So often after an event or something like that, I'll ask somebody if they're comfortable, writing a few things or doing a testimonial. And if they just write me a few words, then I can share it with our, marketing or put it together and as a testimonial. I find those when people started seeing more and more C-level, high VP levels working with us. And these were, a lot of people would be in my network that was really influenced. Like I worked for Groupon for almost 8 years, and I would say a high percentage of those were in my Groupon network working now for other companies. But when they see some very high level people working with me or working with Yaymaker, and then they shout out that, hey, we had the best murder mystery experience or things like that, it was awesome, A, B, and C, and they'd post it and I'd reshare it. That really helped, I'd say, be a catalyst for more leads, because they're like, oh, if that. So I'm a real believer in those third-party examples, those testimonials, and getting others to also shout you out. I mean, I'm a self-promoter, but when other people can shout out the things you're working on, I think I think that is really strong. And I once interviewed Joey Nalevka. He's the VP of Sales and Operations, I believe, both of House. And it was amazing because I interviewed him. He shared some content on how to be a successful leader. He was really organized with it. He had his 3 C's on building a great strategy. And he talked about coordination and communication. And I got to remember what the 3rd C was. But basically, and after actually in the interview, he shouted out Yaymaker and basically like, hey, it was, we had a great team building experience. Thank you. And again, he had just some really strong content. He was very well respected within Groupon, within other leaders, other companies, and how. So I've like repurposed some of his content into little 60-second clips or things like that and repost. But I find the power of your network and other people's network can really help improve your thought leadership, credibility, but also help bring in new sales.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a ton of sense. And I wanted to ask you, I've got probably 2 final questions. And one of them was about thought leadership. And when you mentioned the 3 C's, I thought that's thought leadership, right? So my friends, Rory and AJ over at Brand Builders Group, who, by the way, I should introduce you to if you're not familiar with them yet, they'd be a great contact. But I talk about thought leadership is how are you forwarding the message of what's already been said? So for someone who's building their brand and they don't want to just like generate leads, but they also want to truly leave a legacy and build a a name and change maybe the thinking in a space and be seen as a thought leader, how do you know when you're there? Like, can you be a thought leader right away just by sharing content? Do you need to come up with your own methodology and frameworks? I guess I'd love to hear your take on it and how we know when we're truly thought leaders.
So I do think it's an evolving journey. I mean, there are people who are much stronger thought leaders than myself. I've kind of self-proclaimed I'm a thought leader in a few lanes. I was honored. LinkedIn badged me as a top entrepreneurship voice, so that kind of felt more validity. But so that felt good. But I think realistically, it's, when you get others asking for your advice, I mean, that to me is, I mean, that then you're now being more and more of a thought leadership. I mean, when I have friends and family now asking me for my advice on, hey, what should I do on LinkedIn, or how should I brand myself, or I'm thinking about my first article. I mean, to me, it's baby steps. But I mean, once people are asking you for advice, I feel like now you're at least a micro thought leader. So, so I mean, I'm sure there's different measures or exact things, but I mean, I would say if you're getting, at least, a couple times a month, someone asking you for advice, I mean, you're on your way. But again, and just like working out, the more you put into it, you're going to see the results. It's that, after 3 weeks, you might not see many results, but after 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, you're going to see the fruits of your labor. And I think the same thing's true with thought leadership. And then for me also, when I get asked to be on more podcasts, or I asked to contribute or collaborate with an article, or asked to be on a board, those are indicators to me that my content's working, and that people are seeing me more as a thought leader.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you shared there too at the end about think about it like working out is so important. I know AJ and Rory from, I worked with them at their company Brand Builders for some time and have a lot of respect for them. And we would coach people to launch podcasts. And so Rory's advice to people was always, don't look at your numbers for a year. Like, don't even look at the downloads for a year. And I think it sounds like what you're saying too. And I know for me, if I post something that I get too caught up in what are the numbers and who likes it and who doesn't. I mean, number one, there's so many people who see your things that will never comment, they'll never like, but you're dripping on them and you're influencing them. And over time, eventually some of them are going to come forward and say, hey, I'd love your help. I'd love your service. And you never know, right? It's like that law of reciprocity. And it's a slow build. And I think we have to get that, like, be in it for the long run.
Yeah, I have to share one thing. There was once I was at a wedding, and this was, I want to say about 8-10 months ago. And I was sitting next to someone who I used to work with. It was that group when he was a manager. And now he's like a VP of another company. And he shared, oh yeah, we did an event with you and it was amazing. He's never engaged in any of my content, never commented that I remember anything, or that, are very rarely. And I had no idea, but it was the influence of me putting content out there and him seeing others, and the combination of things that he just reached out or went on our site and booked an event. And that was something I didn't even know. So literally, it's probably 100 times as many people are seeing your content than engaging your content. If you get a 1% engagement, that's probably pretty good. 2% probably great. But I'm saying, so realize 50 to 100 times of many people are seeing it, and you just never know. And sometimes it just takes that one. I had one person reach out to me, and we did almost a 7-figure partnership deal because of just staying in close connected, and he's seeing me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. I love that so much. Yeah, you literally never know. Brendan Burchard has this great quote. He says, never underestimate the value of one. And I think that's so important to remember with social, because if we judge it based on who's responding and how are people, first of all, I think that's a fast track to not being willing to show up and position yourself as a thought leader, because you're too concerned about what other people think, which is not thought leadership, in my opinion. And then 2, you'll stop and you don't realize what's going on behind the scenes and who you could be impacting. So it's so powerful. I want to ask, so I shared this with you in the pre-chat before we recorded. When I have men on the show, I love asking about the women in their lives. And I know you've got a wife who's a real estate powerhouse, and she's a professor, like very well educated from what you shared. And so I'd love to hear from you, Matthew, for Sabine, right? I think is her name. What would you say is the number one life lesson that you've learned from Sabine?
Oh, wow. The number one life lesson I've learned from Sabine, I mean, passion makes a big difference. I mean, if you literally jump into what you're doing with passion and with the goal to really help people. If that's really, you're not a salesperson, you are really there as a support and a consultant. If that's really your mind frame, I think that goes a long way. I mean, so yeah, you're right. My wife, I love talking and bragging about her. She went Yale undergrad, got her PhD in psychology, had some health challenges, had to leave the whole educational, but then after a few years break, she got into real estate, and I see her mind frame. She doesn't look at, I mean, it's not about the dollars. She treats whether someone's buying $100,000 condo or a $3 million property or so the same way. Like their family, and she connects with people. So I always talk about connection, but if people know that you care about them, that I feel like that may be one of the most important things. So with Sabine, I mean, she lives, breathes, and sees it. She loves helping people, and I feel like that has been instrumental in her success.
Yeah, that's so good.
No.
There's so many lessons there from what you shared. And I think
No.
that's at the end of the day, the bottom line for us in sales or entrepreneurs is just care about people, treat everyone, right? It's very best you can. And it always comes back. So thank you so much for this. This was so fun.
Oh,
and
yes.
yeah, I'd love if you could share, Matthew, where can people connect with you? So if you want to share your LinkedIn,
Sure.
I know people can get your book as well on Amazon, or I'm assuming other booksellers.
Sure,
So where people can go
so
to connect.
I always look at my book, Find Your Yay, but that's on Amazon. You can get that. My email is mrolnick, my first initial last name, @yaymaker.com. But really, my preference is people connect with me on LinkedIn. So they can find me on LinkedIn, Matthew Rolnick. And yeah, as I said, I love connecting with people and trying to find new opportunities, collaborations, and I make myself fairly accessible. So
amazing. Thank you so much. So yeah, if you're listening, go connect with Matthew on LinkedIn. Let him know you heard him here on the show. And thanks again. This was really, really fun. And I'm thinking in a bigger way about our content too that we share. So I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Elyse. I look forward to staying in touch and collaborating with you as well, and wishing you the best.
Thank you so much. All right, my listener, go connect with Matthew online. Go check out his book, Find Your Yay. We'll link everything here in the show notes. As always, I'm so grateful for you being a part of the She Sells community. I'll see you on our next episode.